the 83-year-old mother of Sean Diddy. Janice Combs took the witness stand, leaving everyone stunned as an eerie silence enveloped the federal courthouse in Manhattan. While he maintained his composure throughout the trial, Diddy now appeared distinctly uneasy. Worried glances passed among his attorneys. The prosecution grew increasingly resolute. This moment was on the brink of transformation. If you're joining us for the first time, please hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated on high-profile cases like this one. Our reporting is comprehensive and grounded in facts, setting it apart from the rest. Even Diddy's mother was not expected to take the stand. The atmosphere in the room crackled with tension, fueled by the day's contentious happenings. As she carefully approached the front of the courtroom to take the oath of office, the gaze of everyone was fixed on the elderly woman. The gallery buzzed with astonished whispers. Even the judge appeared taken aback. Janice Combs, a steadfast supporter of her son's lengthy career, was now prepared to take the stand and testify under oath. No prior notice or warning had been given. Until that moment, Diddy appeared confident throughout the trial, flashing smiles at fans in the gallery and frequently engaging with his lawyers. A change had taken place. The sight of his mother, his staunchest supporter, testifying as a prosecution witness, could have been the turning point. Maybe it was the realization that his closest friend was finally prepared to share his thoughts. Maybe it was the dawning awareness that his meticulously crafted defense was on the verge of collapse. Diddy was done with acting, whatever that entailed. He no longer occupied that space like a celebrity. As a son, he observed his mother preparing to reveal the truth to him. The courtroom was caught off guard by Janice Combs' speech as she began to speak. The insights his mother shared, from their intimate conversations to her growing concerns over time and the undeniable truth she faced, affected far more than just his situation. A mother faced the painful truth of her son's real identity. The trial's first day unfolded much like the rest. Soft whispers enveloped the room. As the day's proceedings awaited their cue, journalists settled into their designated seats while attorneys whispered strategies. With the mention of Janice Combs, the prosecutor declared. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. The sound of a pin dropping echoed. Critics viewed it as a desperate move, whereas supporters considered it a mistake. Janice Combs walked to the platform with an unwrinkled posture that belied her years, her intense gaze reflecting her unwavering resolve. Diddy, engrossed in paperwork with his lawyers, looked taken aback as the judge raised an eyebrow. His face drained of all color. His fingers, once confidently flicking through papers, paused mid-action. Janice Combs took her place on the witness stand, avoiding the eyes of those around her. Even with her son's confused and hurt expression, she barely looked his way. "Mrs. Combs, I appreciate your presence today," the prosecutor said. "I understand how difficult this must be." Janice Combs nodded subtly, her remarkable calmness evident in the tense atmosphere. The entire trial shifted when the judge granted her permission. Why? Because the words Janice Combs was about to speak were far removed from any media narrative. This wasn't just gossip from former associates of the company. She had nurtured him, celebrated his successes, and defended him against critics for years. This was her narrative. Mrs. Combs' testimony was deemed biased, prompting Diddy's lawyer to swiftly object on the grounds of family privilege. The prosecution countered, asserting that discussions between a mother and her adult son lack legal protection, particularly regarding claims of misconduct. The court overruled the objection and instructed Mrs. Combs to continue after a brief interjection. Silence enveloped the courtroom. Reporters fixated on their keyboards, no longer typing, Even the court sketch artists paused, pencils hovering above the page. The prosecution maintained a calm demeanor. Yet Diddy's family in the gallery appeared shocked and confused. After adjusting her glasses, Janice Combs focused intently on the prosecutor. "I've been requested to share my experiences regarding conversations with my son throughout the years, and the behaviors I observed that raised my concerns. I'm here because I believe the truth must be revealed, regardless of the discomfort it may bring." The courtroom buzzed softly. Diddy tugged at his sleeve, causing the lead attorney to stumble as he rose to voice yet another complaint. He seemed ready for the moment, mentally bracing himself, aware of the witness's age and the weight of her words. The prosecutor proceeded gently. "Mrs. Combs, could you share with the court about your relationship with your son?" In spite of the seriousness of the occasion, Janice Combs took a deep breath and began to speak. One of the most significant criminal trials in recent memory was forever changed by the statements that came next. "I raised Sean as a single mother after his father was murdered when he was just a child," she said. "I worked multiple jobs to provide for him, to give him opportunities I never had. I wished for him to be strong and successful, and he truly became that. He surpassed every dream I held for him." As she spoke, she reflected on the joy of witnessing her son's remarkable rise from intern to music executive, producer to performer, entrepreneur to millionaire, reflecting on his youthful spirit of adventure and determination. Her expression softened. She believed Sean was inherently charismatic, a natural leader. Even as a child, he had a knack for persuading anyone of anything. She remarked on his gift, her expression brightening into a subtle grin. As she spoke, she tilted her head slightly toward the jurors. Yet, somewhere along the way, a shift occurred. Success arrived swiftly and thoroughly. In an instant, everyone was eager to agree with him. Everyone sought something from him. He was treated as if he were above the rules that bound everyone else. And I began to see him embrace that notion, as the prosecutor gently guided her through her memories of Diddy's glory days in the early 2000s. Janice Combs shared her worries about the troubling changes in her son's behavior, his increasing control over those around him, his fiery reactions when provoked, and his nonchalant disregard for personal boundaries. "I initially attributed it to the pressure," she remarked. "The entertainment industry can be unforgiving, and he was managing a lot. However, I began to notice unsettling details during my visits to his residences. Young women looked dazed, staff seemed fearful, and there were rooms I was barred from entering." She recounted. One visit to his Miami home in 2008 stood out vividly. She spoke up, saying, "I arrived unannounced," which drew nervous laughter from several audience members. Mothers have that effect. There had been a party the night before. As I entered, I noticed the staff tidying up, but something felt off. This wasn't the usual after-party cleanup. They were gathering phones from different rooms. A young woman wept as a security guard led her away. She hadn't reached out in advance, and Sean fumed at the sight of her. The prosecutor presented a photograph to Mrs. Combs. "Do you know this place?" She glanced at it thoughtfully. "This is the pool house at Sean's home in Los Angeles. He transformed it into what he referred to as a studio around 2010, but he kept it under wraps. Being denied entry felt unusual to me. I had always been welcomed in his homes prior to this." She continued to share her escalating concerns and her efforts to discuss them with her child. Then she spoke with greater conviction, saying, "Mothers do that too." I had posed my questions, but he would brush me off, insisting I didn't grasp how things operated in his realm, that everything was consensual, that it was merely the lifestyle of the music industry. Specific discussions were examined by the prosecutor. Did your son ever talk to you about the allegations made against him by women? Janice Combs nodded slowly. Yes. When the first accusations started coming to light in 2017, I called him right away. Every mother would. I asked him point blank if there was any truth to the rumors. He insisted they were false, claiming they were after money, and that this was a common occurrence for successful men in the industry. She paused, clearly worn out. I trusted him. I yearned to trust him. He was my son. The prosecutor asked, "Did something happen to change that belief?" Her answer was a quiet yes, her voice softening. In late 2023, after Cassie filed her lawsuit, I faced him once more in his New York apartment. We found ourselves alone. I expressed my need for honesty, no legal jargon, no public statements, just the raw truth shared between a mother and son. As she spoke, the courtroom fell into a hush. That day, he seemed changed, maybe weary. The mask slipped just a bit. He didn't reveal it all, but he shared a thought that stuck with me. Mom, you don't create what I've created by following the crowd. Sometimes there are casualties. That's business. For the first time, her voice wavered a bit. That's not how I raised him. That's not business. That's not right. Diddy sat silently throughout the entire testimony, fixated on the table. The lawyers representing him scribbled notes quickly, sometimes leaning in to whisper. Diddy seemed absorbed in the truth of his mother's words, eluding their understanding. Janice Combs elaborated on how her concerns intensified in early 2024 following the release of CCTV footage depicting Diddy assaulting Cassie in a hotel corridor. I reached out to him right after watching that video. Devastated barely scratches the surface. I questioned how he could possibly do something like that. He shared that the relationship was going through a tough phase. I was only witnessing a single moment, not the whole picture. He insisted he had changed since then. The prosecutor asked, "Did you believe him?" Her answer was clear, no. Not anymore, as she had witnessed flashes of that rage over the years. It was never aimed at her, but at staff and business associates. The Sean in that video felt familiar, and that hit me hard. She mentioned that as she continued to testify. The weight of the accusations against her son became undeniable. She discovered lists of women's names in his home office, marked with comments like handled and potential problem, which made her uneasy during a visit in early 2024. When I inquired about it, he snatched the paper from my hands and insisted it was business. Nothing for me to fret over, she claimed. Yet, the look in his eyes told a different story. As a mother, you can sense when your child is concealing something, even in adulthood. The prosecutor presented another piece of evidence. Mrs. Combs, I'm now showing you what has been labeled as Government Exhibit 42. Do you recognize this document? Her intentional nod showed she had reviewed the page. Yes. These are notes I started after that conversation. I began recording things I had observed over the years, discussions we'd had, and behaviors that worried me. I could no longer overlook it. What prompted you to start these notes? I feared I was losing my perspective, that my love for my son was blurring my judgment. Putting everything on paper allowed me to recognize the pattern with clarity. What I discovered sent chills down my spine. Diddy looked up at his mother for the first time since she began her testimony, and their eyes met. A fleeting yet impactful moment unfolded between mother and son. Their silent exchange spoke volumes of unspoken pain, betrayal, and perhaps a hint of understanding. Janice Combs' resolve was evident as she redirected her focus to the prosecutor. My love for my son is unwavering. However, I can no longer keep up the facade. I can no longer remain silent. Too many have suffered. The prosecutor considered the witness's emotional state before proceeding. Mrs. Combs, I would like to inquire about a particular conversation you had with your son in April of this year, following his arrest but prior to the start of this trial. Could you share with the court details of that conversation, preparing for the most demanding part of her testimony? Janice Combs shifted in her chair. Yes, I visited Sean at the detention center, in a secluded room. It was only the two of us. Special arrangements had been made due to his status. The woman explained. I told him I needed to hear the whole truth before I could continue my public support for him. I told Sean, I'm your mother. My love for you is unwavering, but I need clarity on what I'm supporting. As she recounted his response, the courtroom was enveloped in a profound silence. He remained silent for a while. Finally, he spoke the truth. The truth is, I crafted a world where I set the rules, where my desires came to life, and where people either joined in or were cast aside. Was it ever truly right? No. Did it cause pain? Yes, but that's the nature of power. Ma, it's always been this way. She paused briefly to collect her thoughts before moving on. I inquired about the specific allegations, the individuals involved, the recordings, the drugs, the threats. I needed to hear his denial if it wasn't true. The prosecution asked, did he deny it? Her answer was clear no. He claimed, it's complicated. Initially, everything was consensual. No one was compelled. Yet, once you enter that realm, distinctions fade. Occasionally. Individuals reconsider their choices down the line. By that point, they had already seized the money and the opportunities. They had reaped the benefits. As she continued, Janice Combs' hands trembled slightly. I explained that consent gained through pressure, fear of repercussions, or intoxication isn't genuine. He just responded. That's not how things operate in my world. As time passed, the anxiety grew among Diddy's lawyers at the defense table. Diddy focused on his mother while his lead attorney scribbled a note and discreetly passed it to him. The prosecutor maintained a relaxed stance. Did your son ever directly confess to the crimes he's accused of? Not in those exact terms, Janice Combs replied, but he revealed enough for me to grasp the reality. He mentioned that the system I created functioned effectively for years. Everyone received what they desired. The trouble began when individuals chose to alter the rules. She focused her attention directly on the jurors. I taught my son to own his actions and be accountable. When he shared his thoughts with me, I realized he had strayed. He no longer viewed people as individuals, but rather as mere pawns in a game he thought he could manipulate. After that meeting, Janice Combs penned a letter to her son, introduced by the prosecutor as an extra exhibit. In the letter, she expressed her unconditional love for all. However, she also conveyed her deep disappointment and declined to defend her actions, which she now recognized as damaging and misguided. When the prosecutor asked, "Did you get a reply to that letter?" "Yes," she said. "Sean called me." He started off angry, then shifted to almost begging. He claimed I didn't grasp the stakes, that his entire life, everything he'd created, was on the line. I replied that this was exactly why I needed to speak the truth, because lives were at risk, not just his. After that, the prosecutor inquired why she had chosen to testify. "Mrs. Combs, what brings you here today? Why did you choose to testify in this case?" Janice Combs let out a long sigh. "Because the truth matters. Because accountability matters. I've raised my son to be better than this. True love, a mother's love, means wanting your child to face the consequences of their actions so they can grow, not shielding them from those consequences and watching them decline." Her gaze shifted back to her child, now filled with greater intensity. "I'm here because my love for my son compels me to speak the truth, even when it stings. I'm here because the women who suffered deserve recognition and support." And I'm here because Sean must realize that wealth, fame, or influence do not exempt anyone from fundamental human decency. Something within Diddy shifted when she spoke. His shoulders slumped, and the facade of confidence he had maintained since the trial began finally crumbled. He seemed like a child facing his mother's disappointment, a judgment he was unprepared for, rather than a powerful music mogul. The prosecutor expressed gratitude to Mrs. Miles Combs, and she returned to her seat. During cross-examination, the defense counsel stood with a mild demeanor, almost kind, rather than casting doubt on her credibility or suggesting hidden agendas. He focused on demonstrating that her evidence relied on assumptions and discussions rather than direct observation of the events in question. Janice Combs maintained her composure throughout, aware of the limitations of her testimony. Yet unwavering in its core truth, her son had created and operated a system that exploited and harmed others. And he had essentially confessed this to her in private conversations. She paused, her eyes drifting back to her child as she was finally led away from the witness stand. Though no words were exchanged, the look spoke volumes of a mother's yearning for justice, mingled with disappointment and deep affection. With her posture poised and her pride intact, she gracefully moved past the defense table and exited the courtroom. Diddy watched her leave, and his expressions showed that, among all the trial evidence, his mother's words affected him the most. Once the facades were stripped away, only the truth lingered between a mother and her son. Dr. Margaret Chen, a specialist in family psychology, has dealt with cases involving notable public figures. The prosecution pursued her evidence, following Janice Combs. Once her credentials were confirmed, the prosecutor asked her to explain the significance of the earlier testimony. "What we witnessed today was truly remarkable," Dr. Chen stated. "In high-profile cases with wealthy or famous defendants, family members often choose silence or steadfast support, no matter the evidence. However, Mrs. Combs' decision to testify marks a significant departure from this norm. Psychologically, it indicates that she experienced a moral tipping point where the conflict between her love for her son and the recognition of his wrongdoing became impossible to ignore. Her portrayal of a gradual awakening instead of a sudden realization adds considerable weight to her testimony." Janice Combs outlined a pattern where her son dismissed her concerns, used his job as a shield, and behaved as if the rules were irrelevant to him. The prosecution sought further insight into these relationships. Dr. Chen noted that these are classic signs of what we term power insulation. Those with immense wealth, fame, and influence frequently find themselves surrounded by individuals who bolster their sense of uniqueness and protect them from repercussions. A mother often remains the last person capable of breaking through that insulation. Having known the individual prior to their power and wealth, she elaborated on how Diddy allegedly shared insights with his mom that reflected a viewpoint shaped by years of his actions being embraced and rationalized.